everyone, and welcome back to Tar Talks. Today's episode is one that completely changed the Indian stock market forever and led to an entire event because of which no Indian could ever view investing and talking the same way. So, what is today's episode about, Srinav?
The Big Bull.
The Big Bull. Who is the Big Bull?
Harshad Mehta.
Harshad Mehta, a name that still echoes through the corridors of Indian finance. Once a middle class man from Rajkot, he became a stock market sensation in the early 1990s, earning titles, as Reena very rightly mentioned, the Big Bull, for his aggressive market strategies and larger than life lifestyle. But like any rampant success story like this one, there was a scam in the cracks that completely exposes India's financial system.
So basically, at the time, Indian banks couldn't invest in stock market directly. Instead, they could invest in government securities, things like bonds and treasury bills, often through something known as the ready forward deal, which is the RF deal.
Exactly.
These were essentially short-term loans between banks, and what they did was where securities were temporarily exchanged with the promise of a repurchase.
So basically, imagine a system where it's like a short term loan which is backed by securities, which a bank expresses through bank receipts. So, a bank receipt is basically like you will get the security, but you'll get it later. So, here is the proof that you'll get it later, and this is the bank receipt.
So now, when this came into the Big Bull's mind, so he basically worked as a broker who facilitated these deals between banks. But he discovered a loophole. He managed to obtain fake or unsecured BRs, which are bank receipts, from certain banks. These BRs had no real securities backing them, but they still looked legitimate. Using these, he tricked other banks into giving him large sums of money, believing these transactions were safe and backed by the government bonds.
But instead of keeping the money within the bank system, what Mehta essentially did is divert this money to the stock market. So this would not have been as problematic as it ended up being if all the money would have been circulating within banks themselves. But taking it to the stock market, what he essentially did was he began heavily investing in selected shares, most famously the Associated Cement Company. As he bought more and more, the prices for these shares completely soared. For the ACC, for instance, jumped from being around 200 rupees to being 9,000 rupees per share. This was a natural growth. This was artificially created by Mehta's manipulation.
So, as the stock prices rose, the buzz around Harshad Mehta grew even more. The media admired him and investors followed him day in and day out. And the Sensex, the Bombay Stock Exchange Index, climbed dramatically from about 1,000 points in 1991 to over 4,400 in the early 1992.
This single instance explains so well the kind of impact Harshad Mehta had on like Indians in stock markets and investing all around the nation. To have like the points of the BSE go from 1,000 to 4,400 in just 1 year is crazy. And to keep this entire process going, Mehta used his inflated shares as collateral to get even more loans, which he used again to buy more shares. Which means that essentially, with like the fake bank receipts in the beginning, Harshad Mehta had managed to create this entire system of continuously getting fake loans. A cycle of manipulation fueled by fake receipts and borrowed money. Except that it's very obvious, a scam like this cannot last forever.
In April 1992, journalist Suchita Dalal published an explosive article in the Times of India. She revealed how Mehta had used counterfeit BRs to raise money and manipulate stock prices. The scam scale was large, around 5,000 crores, roughly $1 billion at the time.
You know how much is 5,000 crores worth right now?
No.
Almost 40,000 crores. That's money people cannot even imagine. So it was more than obvious when this revelation triggered absolute panics because banks now realized they were holding worthless BRs. The stock market crashed. Within months, the Sensex dropped from its peak to nearly half. Investors literally lost their life savings. Banks suffered major losses, obviously holding fake BRs, and the entire financial system was shaken. Harshad Mehta, as a result, was arrested by the CBI in November 1992.
He was charged with over 70 criminal offenses and faced hundreds of civil suits. Though he always maintained that he hadn't broken the law but merely exploited its loopholes, the damage was undeniable.
If I'm being very honest, this one statement, because we know Harshad Mehta continuously kept on like expanding upon this point. What gets to me is that he is technically right and he's not the one that's broken the law. who have broken the law to think about it very essentially are the smaller banks who agreed to give BR without any security backing it up. Because we do know that that is not right. And the fact that it's so easy to manipulate smaller banks and smaller government systems to be able to do so is a loophole he found.
The scam also accelerated the shift to electronic trading. In 1993, the National Stock Exchange, NSC, was set up, replacing physical share certificates and manual systems with more digital platforms. The RBI tightened rules for the interbank transactions, especially around BRs, and banks had to set up the due diligence practices.
Corporate governance also came into focus. Now, regulations made it mandatory for companies to disclose financials more transparently and following ethical accounting practices.
So, despite everything, Harshad Mehta remained a fascinating figure. In interviews, he often said, I haven't done anything the system didn't allow me to do. To many, he was both a mastermind and a mirror, reflecting the flaws of a system begging to reform.
Harshad Mehta's story is a striking blend of brilliance, ambition, and also eventual downfall. From humble beginnings, he rose to become a powerful force in India's financial world, captured the imagination of an entire nation with his bold moves and sharp intellect. He wasn't just a stockbroker, he was a phenomenon, a man who challenged the norms of a rigid system and manipulated its loopholes with unmatched finesse. But success always comes with a cost.
Yet, in a strange way, Harshad Mehta's downfall triggered something positive. A wave of reforms that made India's financial systems more secure, transparent, and modern. His legacy, through controversial, became a turning point in the country's economic history.
In the end, Harshad Mehta remains a complex figure, part visionary, part manipulator, but all parts genius. Remembered not just for the scam he executed, but for the way he managed to redefine the Indian stock market, for better or for worse. So, that was Harshad Mehta on to Heart Talks. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you next episode too.